everyone, this is Lomi, and all my doll friends have been talking about resin made specifically for 3D printing BJDs. They all had good things to say about ResiOne's TH-BJD resin, and even though I love my friends, I take everything everyone tells me with a healthy dose of skepticism, so it seemed like a good idea to test it out myself. I got ResiOne to send me some of the cream pink THBJD resin to try out, and now you get to hear my thoughts about the process. Now, I wear a respirator when working with resins, but someone always asks, so I stole a sniff of this stuff and I can safely say it doesn't smell any worse than typical 3D printer resin. You should still keep a mask on and make sure you're printing in a well-ventilated area. The first thing I noticed was that this stuff is super thick. I actually had to put off printing for weeks because it recommends a temperature of at least 75 degrees and it kept getting so cold at night that I thought the room would be too chilly for a good print. This is probably the thickest resin I've ever used, so definitely use it warm. The instructions on the bottle weren't super clear for settings, and I discovered while ResiOne has downloadable settings for a lot of printers, my OG Saturn wasn't one of them, so I made up my own based on a few of their resources, and these worked great. I had to print my doll body on 2 plates due to the size of the pieces, and that doesn't include a head yet because I'm bad at making aesthetic decisions. The prints were super slow, both took like 20 hours, so be prepared to wait. The resin was also a lot tougher than I expected, so even though I was really prying at the edges of the skate to get something to pop off, nothing chipped or cracked. I ripped off the supports without trimming any, like some kind of monster, and left a few pits, but this is a prototype, and half the point of me testing stuff is seeing how mean I can be to it, because my job is ruining dolls, so you don't have to. The instructions said not to immerse the parts in solvent for longer than 5 minutes, but I wanted these super clean, so they got washed in alcohol for 4 minutes. Then they got blown dry with my air compressor to make sure there was no solvent left on them, and then the parts get cured for 10 whole minutes. That's a really long time, and it sounded wrong, but it's what I did. Then I flipped them over and cured the other side for 10 minutes as well. The instructions recommended letting the parts rest for a few hours before assembling, so I threw them all on a table and came back to sand support marks the next day. I removed the supports with some metal files because that's the fastest way to get the little bumps off. I was being gentle at first, but I noticed right away that there wasn't a lot of discoloration where I was filing. Seemed like a good sign. When I was done with the files, I used a 320 grit sanding sponge to remove the file marks. It smoothed out easier than I expected, without feeling super fragile. After the 320 grit sponge, I went to a 600 grit sandpaper, and that smoothed everything out quite nicely. I was able to be pretty firm with this hand, and I never felt like the resin was flexing or at risk of breakage, so definitely not brittle. I also noticed the color is a great match for my Fairyland and Eeple House dolls, which is exciting for the possibility of making custom heads, hands, and other parts. So then it was time for the moment of truth. The big selling point of this resin is supposed to be that the friction points don't produce powder. So I popped the wrist ball into the wrist and decided to grind it around real good, and nothing. So maybe I wasn't rubbing hard enough. I'm pretty sure I can get this thing to make powder. So you can see I'm pushing hard, scraping the parts together as hard as I can, and still nothing. No dust on my gloves. So we push even harder than that, scraping around, and ha! I got it! There's a scratch in there now. Or, no, wait, actually it was a little bit of blue PLA that must have been on my files or sandpaper that got down inside the wrist. So that little blue plastic thing scratched it some when it was grinding in between the parts, but the scratch is pretty superficial, and honestly, that would scratch a cast resin doll too. I still can't get the joints to powder or discolor. So I'll move on to the elbow because this is a different challenge. I thought these thin parts would be really delicate, but they didn't really feel all that fragile. I could use much larger files to remove the support marks, and I think I will next time. But this elbow joint is larger than the elbow I sculpted because this was my first time designing an elbow and some mistakes were made. So this joint has to actually pop together like that. I sort of expected it would crack when it popped in there, but hey, this is a great opportunity to hold that little elbow piece more easily and sand the supports off it too. So I finished up that elbow a little imperfectly and tried the upper arm. Wait, wrong arm. This doesn't have the range of motion I want yet, but that's a design issue and half the reason I'm prototyping this doll to begin with. But I figured I'd grind this end of the elbow together too, since it's a little rougher, so it should powder something, right? No, I guess not. These really thin bits are a lot stronger than I expected. You can see it takes a good bit of force to get these pieces to pop together, but I don't see any sign of stress or breakage. So this stuff really is as tough as everyone says. There are a few random things to mention. First, I forgot to turn off anti-aliasing for my prints, and that means I'll have to do a lot more finishing work. Anti-aliasing will remove some of this, but not all printers support it, so the resin itself won't cure the need for finishing sanding. It didn't have any trouble showing the little details I added. You can see the toenails on the foot I sculpted just fine. Keeping the supports on rounder parts like the heel will make it easier to remove cleanly, but I think that's just common sense. This is one of the thigh pieces, and it has a line here that I wanted to point out. See it? A visible line. This happened because I added more resin, and I think it was colder than what was in the vat. Some resins are more sensitive to this than others, so always be sure your vat is full before starting. This thin spot was a problem in my joint design, which gave me a paper-thin layer of resin and nothing else. I thought this would be a spot very prone to breakage, but I was able to press quite hard on the area around it, and it only damaged that ultra-thin point. Normally, I'd coat this with more resin to reinforce it, but I'm not sure how that will work with the super long cure time, so that's something I'll have to experiment with more. Overall, I would say I'm impressed with the texture and weight, which are similar to cast resins. It's stronger than I expected, resistant to discoloration, and I still can't get the stuff to make powder at friction points. So what's the catch? Right now, just the price. It's almost $50 a bottle, but the 3 colors it's available in are all the same price. I was able to print a whole 1/4 scale BJD body with 1 bottle and have plenty left for a head and extra hands. And honestly, $50 for a BJD is a pretty sweet deal. The next test is just going to be how well this holds up long term, but since I just printed it, it's gonna take a little bit before I can report on that. And that's all for today though. Thanks for watching. Bye.